What is going on, everybody? Today we have our second 2022 NFL mock draft here on the Draft channel. The first one was uploaded a couple of weeks ago, and a lot of things have changed since then. Of course, the NFL playoffs have gone by. We now have a Super Bowl matchup with the Rams and the Bengals. The Senior Bowl and East-West Shrine Bowl, among other all-star events for draft prospects, have passed by as well. So we have seen multiple players' stocks rise and stocks dip. So there are some significant changes from last mock to this mock. This mock draft will be me predicting the picks. So I'm not saying that these teams should make these selections. These are the players I am predicting will go to these teams. And obviously, I'm probably going to get a lot of them wrong because that's the nature of mock drafting, and we're still early in the month of February. I probably will have a mock draft later in the draft season of what I would do if I was these teams, but I still want to familiarize myself and evaluate with a lot of the players down the board before I do that. This mock draft will be only one round. I think most of my mock drafts going forward will be 2 to 3 rounds, but I still want to stick with one round for now. But this one will have trades. So I do have a few trades in there lined up to spice things up a little bit and I think make it interesting. So without further ado, let's get mock draft 2.0 underway. For the past 2 years, my number one overall pick has not changed. In 2020, it was always Joe Burrow. In 2021, it was always Trevor Lawrence. Well, here, 2 mocks in, we already have a switch. In my first mock draft, I had the Jaguars getting Oregon pass rusher Kayvon Thibodeaux. I still have them getting an edge rusher, but instead, it's going to be Aiden Hutchinson out of Michigan. Over the past 2 weeks, I've seen more praise from media analysts for Aiden Hutchinson, and that's not necessarily to say that the Jaguars are going to pick Hutchinson, but it does feel like there's a little bit more of a consensus around the league from what I've heard and read that Hutchinson is above Thibodeaux. And I think it is more likely Hutchinson is going to be the number one pass rusher off the board. The Jaguars very well could go offensive line as well. Ikem Ekwonu is really starting to get some buzz as a number one pick candidate. I'm a big Ikem Ekwonu guy. I don't think that would be a bad pick at all. Evan Neal as well. A lot of people have him going number one. So if the Jaguars keep this pick, I think it's going to be one of those 4. Ekwonu, Neal, Thibodeaux, or Hutchinson. And for now, it is going to be Aiden Hutchinson for me, but I'm still not overly convinced by it. So for Detroit at 2, obviously, again, if the Lions can trade down, that'd be great. Offensive line is not really a need. Not that you should be drafting for need in the top 2. But I imagine if the Lions stay here, this pick will be one of the pass rushers. And with Hutchinson off the board, that makes it pretty easy to write in Kayvon Thibodeaux. For much of the season, Kayvon Thibodeaux has been the projected number one pick in the draft, but with Aiden Hutchinson's emergence, those two were neck and neck for a while. And now it seems like a lot of draft analysts aren't really sure if Thibodeaux's even going to be a top 3 or top 5 selection. I think that's reaching a little bit. I still think he's going to go in the top 2 to 3 picks, and if Hutchinson goes number 1, I would be a little bit surprised if he wasn't the selection for Detroit at number 2. I think he has a higher ceiling than Hutchinson, and although there are some question marks about Thibodeaux, I think he has the chance to be a real game wrecker, something that the Lions defense definitely needs. The Houston Texans at 3 select Ikem Ekwonu, offensive tackle out of NC State. I have him listed as an offensive lineman because he's played a lot of guard as well, but the Texans are probably going to draft him to play tackle. Offensive tackle is actually one of the stronger positions for Houston with Laramie Tunsil, who's still a very good player. They invested high draft capital into guys a few years ago like Titus Howard. But for Houston, I think you got to go with the best player available, and that very well could be Ikem Ekwonu on their board. For me, I would say he's the best player available here personally. Somebody who was just so good last year for the Wolfpack, somebody who was great upside, and I think would be a great fit for a Houston Texans team who just needs talent, pretty much. So at pick 4, we have our first trade of the day. The Washington Commanders. Yes, this is our first mock draft with them being known as the Commanders are moving up. You know, new team name, new era. Why not get a new quarterback? So the Jets were moving down from pick 4 to pick 11. The Jets will also receive Washington's second rounder, pick 43, Washington's first rounder next year, and Washington's fourth rounder next year. That's a lot in order to move up. But when you're trying to get your franchise quarterback, it might be necessary. I tried to go off of, for that trade, what the 49ers did with moving up for Trey Lance. They gave up 3 first-rounders and a third to move up from 12 to 3. So it's going to be a little bit less for the Commanders to move up since it's going from pick 11 to pick 4, but the idea is the same. So it's a little bit less value, but I think that's about what it would cost for Washington to move up. They're going to get their guy, however, in quarterback Malik Willis, who I think with a strong Senior Bowl week has asserted himself to the number 1 quarterback in the class. There are a ton of question marks about Malik Willis, but what can't be questioned is his traits and his upside. And I think it's a fairly easy statement to say that he has the highest ceiling of any quarterback in this class, but he has a lot of work to do. Probably not somebody who you want starting day 1. So if I'm Washington, I would look to keep Taylor Heinicke or even add a veteran to start ahead of Malik Willis. And don't rush him in there. Do what the Niners did with Trey Lance and stay the course. And then hopefully Malik Willis is ready in year 2 of his career. So it's a big gamble for Washington to make this move, but they have a really talented roster. They have a lot of pieces already in place. Now go and get your quarterback. At pick 5, I had the Giants selecting Kyle Hamilton out of Notre Dame. The Giants are another team who needs to set a culture, set a foundation, and really tear everything down. Now, normally, you wouldn't have a safety as your first pick because of poor positional value, but Kyle Hamilton might be the best pure football player in this year's draft class, somebody who was a team captain for Notre Dame, so he'll be an early leader on that defense who can change the culture for them, and I think he'd be a good fit, and he's the best player available. Carolina at 6, despite a poor Senior Bowl week, I still have Kenny Pickett being the selection here. Pickett didn't have a bad week, but he had a real shot to prove himself as QB1 in this class and just didn't do that. His arm looked unimpressive, but I still think Carolina is going to be very interested in him. I think the Panthers realize that, at least for Matt Rule and a lot of that staff, that it's now or never this upcoming season. And if things go poorly, there could be some jobs who open up in Carolina, and we could see guys like Matt Rule getting fired. So I think they know that they need to upgrade at the quarterback position. They very well could look to get a high-level veteran, but in this case, they are not able to, so they're going to get the most pro-ready quarterback in the draft with Kenny Pickett, who can win them some games next year and keep Matt Rule, along with some of his other coaches, employed. At pick 7, the New York Giants select Evan Neal out of Alabama. This is probably the lowest I can see Neal going. He very well could go number 1 to the Jacksonville Jaguars. I also thought about him at 3 with the Texans. I thought about him at 4 had the Jets not moved down. And then even with the Giants' first round pick, he would have made sense. But there are some question marks about Neal. He hasn't really played at one set position throughout his college career. Played left tackle this past season, was right tackle the year before, played a lot of guard as a freshman. But I also think that shows versatility as well. He can play on a lot of different spots on the line. But if the Giants are drafting him here, he's going to be offensive tackle. Since they have Andrew Thomas on the left side, I guess Neal would go to the right side where he's had experience playing. Neal is a 6'7", 350-pound behemoth. He does have some questions in pass protection, but the athleticism of the upside is definitely there with Evan Neal. And then at pick number 8, I really had trouble figuring out who I wanted the selection to be for the Atlanta Falcons. So the cop-out method here is to trade out. The Philadelphia Eagles will be moving up. The Eagles will be acquiring the 8th pick along with the 40th pick. So they're getting Atlanta's first 2 selections. In exchange, the Falcons get pick 15 and pick 19. Calvin Ridley could very well be on the move this offseason. Maybe the Eagles take a look at him. We could have tried to include Ridley in this trade, but I felt like that just made it way too complicated. So this is the move. The Eagles move up, and they still get another pick in the top 40, while Atlanta moves out of the top 8 and now gets 2 first-round picks. I think it's fair value for both sides. So clearly, by moving up, the Eagles feel that there is a blue-chip level player on the board, and Derek Stingley Jr. definitely has blue-chip upside. He looked like a superstar at LSU as a freshman. When he was a sophomore and a junior, he had trouble staying on the field, and some questions rose about his game. He didn't really play at the same level. But he is still projected to be a very high pick and somebody who we know has the chance to be really good. And the Eagles are going to take a shot on him, moving up, giving up 2 of their first-round picks to do it. But the Eagles do have 3 first-rounders, so I think they may be more willing to trade up if there's a guy like Stingley who falls in this range who they really like. At 9, I had the Broncos getting Sam Howell, quarterback, North Carolina. An interesting pick here. The Broncos, I expect, will have a new starting quarterback next year. I imagine they would likely prefer to add a veteran as well, preferably Aaron Rodgers. but I don't have any player for pick trades in this mock draft. I probably will in the future, having guys like Aaron Rodgers, Deshaun Watson, maybe Russell Wilson on the move. But for this mock draft, I didn't. So the Broncos stay put. They get their quarterback of the future. Sam Howell has sort of gone down and up the board this year. He was a top projected pick at the beginning of the season. Then it looked like it wasn't really clear if he was going to be a first-round pick, but then he played well down the stretch, and it does look like he will be in contention to be the first quarterback off the board. I think the Broncos would certainly really like him, and I think he's someone who could start right away. He is a little bit raw, though, so maybe they do want to still add a veteran. Maybe they want to start Teddy Bridgewater over him. So Denver has a few options here, but I think they could certainly groom Sam Howell to be the guy. The Jets have back-to-back picks at 10 and 11. They acquired pick 11 from the Commanders earlier today in the trade for Washington to get Malik Willis. So with their back-to-back picks, the Jets get Ahmad Sauce Gardner, cornerback out of Cincinnati, and Treylon Burks, wide receiver from Arkansas. Ahmad Gardner is really good. He's 6'2", 6'3", great ball skills, phenomenal production. He very well could be the number one cornerback off the board. That really wouldn't surprise me a whole lot. I think Sauce Gardner is a top 10 prospect. I'm willing to say that. I know a lot of people aren't as high on Sauce as me, but I think it is consensus that Gardner will go in the top half of the first round, and I think the Jets, who certainly could use some corners, could be a good landing spot. The Jets have had a couple young guys who played well down the stretch. Bryce Hall, Brandon Eccles, Michael Carter II. All of them were not bad for being late-round selections over the past couple years, but I think Sauce Gardner can be a true alpha corner, and I think he'd be a great pick here. And then Treylon Burks, adding a dynamic weapon to the offense. It looks like the Jets hit with Elijah Moore, their second-round pick last year, so you got him in the slot. Braxton Berrios had a solid season. Corey Davis is going to be back. And now adding Treylon Burks, who's a big wideout, but he's just a weapon with the ball in his hands. I know a lot of people have compared him to Deebo Samuel, and I think he could be used similarly to Deebo Samuel, but Treylon Burks is bigger. I think he's a tougher runner, and I think he's going to be a really intriguing player. I'm curious to see what his measurables and his athletic testing numbers look like at the Combine. We have another trade. The Pittsburgh Steelers will be moving up from 20 to 12. The Steelers will also receive a 7th-rounder, pick 226, while Minnesota gets 20, 52, which is Pittsburgh's 2nd-rounder, and 207 in the 6th round. So immediately, with the Steelers trading up, I think everybody's probably thinking quarterback. Could it be Matt Corral out of Ole Miss, Desmond Ridder from Cincinnati, Carson Strong out of Nevada? But I have them going with a different position. Charles Cross, offensive tackle out of Mississippi State. I think the Steelers are going to prefer to get a veteran in the offseason. I know all reports from the Senior Bowl suggest that they love Malik Willis, but Malik Willis is also long gone. So I don't know how much they like some of the other quarterbacks, particularly Matt Corral. If they do like one of those guys a lot, then he'd probably be the pick here. But I think the value here with Charles Cross makes a lot of sense. The Steelers do need some help on the offensive line. Charles Cross's stock seems to be all over the place. Some people think he could be a top 5 to 10 pick. Some people think he's a late first rounder. I would say I'm higher on Cross than the consensus. I think he very well could be a top 10 pick. In my first mock draft, I think I had him going 5 to the Giants. So there you go. I think Cross could step in right away and be a key player for this team. Super athletic, and somebody who I think doesn't really get talked enough as a true blue chip prospect. I had the Browns getting Garrett Wilson, wide receiver out of Ohio State. 2nd mock draft in a row here with Wilson being the pick. I think it makes a lot of sense. I think Wilson's the number 1 receiver in the draft class, and the Browns need receiver. So, pretty simple. Tyler Linderbaum, center out of Iowa, to the Baltimore Ravens. They could use some help and reinforcement in the interior of their offensive line. Bradley Bozeman's a fine player, but I believe he is a free agent at the end of the season. So let him go. Get Tyler Linderbaum here, who's one of the best center prospects to enter the league in a while, certainly since Ryan Kelly. Maybe you could argue that Linderbaum's an even better prospect. He's a little bit undersized, but other than that, he is a beast. The Atlanta Falcons, with their first of 2 first-round picks that they got from the Eagles earlier today, start with Jermaine Johnson, edge rusher out of Florida State. Now, I don't think Johnson's going to be a top 10 pick, but based off his Senior Bowl this past week, it's not totally out of the question. He very well could be, and maybe if Atlanta wants him, they have to pick him at 8. But for now, I'm not ready to go that far on the Jermaine Johnson hype train, although he was maybe the best player on the field through Senior Bowl week. He ended up leaving practice a day or so early just because he had already done so well. There's no reason to go back because he couldn't really help out his draft stock even more. The Falcons have the worst pass rush in the NFL last year. They need pass rush pretty badly, so fit makes sense. Nakobe Dean, linebacker, Georgia, to the Philadelphia Eagles. I think Dean very well could go higher than this. In my last mock, I had him going 7 to the Giants. But the Eagles do need linebackers quite a bit. I know GM Howie Roseman neglects drafting linebackers early, but maybe Nakobe Dean fits his bill, and I think the value here at 16 would be very strong for Philadelphia. At 17, I had the Chargers getting Trayvon Walker, edge rusher out of Georgia. This is the same pick I gave the Chargers last time. Trayvon Walker is skyrocketing up draft boards. He's somebody who can play on the inside and as an edge. The Chargers need run defense badly, and I think Walker, his ability to be able to play on the edge and inside, not only helps the Chargers run defense, but also gives them a pass rusher, which they also need alongside Joey Bosa. There are a lot of Georgia defenders who are kind of being slept on throughout the draft process, like Trayvon Walker, Quay Walker, Devontae Wyatt, guys who aren't really being talked about as first-rounders, although Walker is starting to gain some respect. But those other two, Quay Walker and Devontae Wyatt, really are not getting a ton of first-round buzz, but it wouldn't really surprise me if either of them went in the first round. But as Trayvon Walker continues to get his respect, he's climbing up the board. I won't be surprised to see him go higher than this. Matt Corral to the Saints, quarterback out of Ole Miss. So the Saints are going to be entering a rebuild. They are really locked under cap-wise, and this core is going to be dismantled with the new head coach coming in. And I think Matt Corral here at 18 could start the rebuild for them. With Sean Payton gone, they aren't really tied to Taysom Hill anymore. I'm not really sure if they really want to re-sign Jameis, and even if they do, Jameis might ask for some cash. So I don't think either of those two will be back next year for New Orleans, or at least back as a starter, so they're going to need a new QB. I think Matt Corral would be the type of guy to embrace a rebuild. I think he could really lead this team going forward. And although Matt Corral has his weak spots in his game, I do think he has a lot more upside than people give him credit for. At 19, the Atlanta Falcons are back on the clock, and they select Zion Johnson, guard out of Boston College. Zion Johnson was phenomenal during the Senior Bowl as well. I believe he won Senior Bowl Practice Player of the Week. I think he has elevated himself into the first-round conversation, maybe as the top guard off the board ahead of Kenyon Green out of Texas A&M. The last time the Falcons picked an offensive guard out of Boston College in the first round was Chris Lindstrom. That pick ended up working out pretty well. Lindstrom's become a pretty quality player, but they could use another guard alongside him. Why not add another former Boston College guy in Zion Johnson? At 20, the Vikings, who moved down earlier today, select George Karlaftis, edge rusher out of Purdue. A lot of people think Karlaftis is going to go in the top 10. I just don't really see it. He's a smart player with a high motor, but he doesn't really have the length and athleticism to, I think, truly be a game changer at the next level. I still think he's going to be a first rounder, but I think people are slightly overrating his stock. I do think the Vikings want to add some more pass rushers, continue to build in the trenches, and I think Karlaftis would be a nice pick. Devin Lloyd, linebacker out of Utah to the Patriots. I fully expect Devin Lloyd to go higher than this, but this is just sort of how the board ended up playing out. I think Bill Belichick is going to love the idea of having one of the best linebacking prospects in quite a while in Devin Lloyd added to his defense, and even if it's not the biggest need, again, I don't know if New England really wants to draft for need. I think Devin Lloyd would be just such a good fit with that defense. Jameson Williams, wide receiver, Alabama, to the Las Vegas Raiders. Again, wide receiver is not the biggest need for the Raiders. They have Hunter Renfrow, who really emerged out the slot this season. Zay Jones had a great season. Darren Waller is a wide receiver tight end hybrid, but I still think they really want that long-range playmaker that Henry Ruggs was able to provide, and even once he left, Deshaun Jackson, although Jackson is 34 years old and not part of the future, so because of that, I think they're going to want their new burner, their new big play threat, and I think that can be Jameson Williams, who has unbelievable explosiveness, unbelievable speed, and people don't talk about how big he is. He's about 6'2", 190, so he's not one of these smaller players who is super quick. He's a big guy, and I think he could be a true alpha receiver one day. He had a phenomenal season this past year at Alabama, and I think he'd be a great pick for them. Trent McDuffie, cornerback, Washington, to the Cardinals. The Cardinals have needed cornerback for quite a while. I know it's cliche to compare players to guys who played for the same school, but there are some parallels with McDuffie and Byron Murphy, who was already on the Cardinals. Murphy had a slightly disappointing season this past year, and his final year of his contract is coming. So if the Cardinals don't want to pay Byron Murphy, Maybe they want to pick a guy who's like Byron Murphy in Trent McDuffie, who I think has a lot of similarities, is a gritty, tough corner who can play the boundary, but is also really good as a nickel corner. So I think McDuffie and Murphy could complement each other pretty well, regardless if Murphy is a piece of their future or not. And then we have another trade at 24. The Miami Dolphins are moving up 5 spots with the Dallas Cowboys. So Miami gets pick 24, Dallas gets 29, along with pick 100 and a future 6. The Dolphins will be selecting offensive tackle Trevor Penning out of Northern Iowa. So the Dolphins need offensive line really bad. Penning had an up and down Senior Bowl with some good moments here and there. And I think with his athleticism and upside, it's going to be hard for a team like the Dolphins not to want to make this offer and go up and get him. Somebody who has a chance to be really good, a super freak athlete. We saw another freak athlete out of Northern Iowa last year, an offensive tackle, Spencer Brown, who was picked in the 3rd round by the Bills and ended up having a pretty good rookie season and looks to be their long-term right tackle. So if seeing what Spencer Brown was able to do, outperforming his draft stock, I imagine that'll certainly give the Dolphins a lot of hope here with the selection of Trevor Penning. At 25, the Bills get Kenyon Green, guard out of Texas A&M. The Bills don't have a ton of glaring needs, but I do think they could look to ensure the interior of their offensive line, and I think Kenyon Green here would be a very solid value pick. David Ojabo, edge rusher out of Michigan, going to the Tennessee Titans. In my last mock, I had Ojabo going 8. I very well could see him going super high, but I think that might have been a little bit too extreme on my part. 26 might be a bit low for him, but again, this is how the board played out, and the Titans are getting an absolute steal. Harold Landry is a free agent this year. He's probably going to want a contract that is in the triple figures of at least $100 million. I don't know how much the Titans are willing to do that. So let's say they let Landry go. Now you get a new edge rusher in Ojabo who is quite raw but has the ceiling to become a star at the next level. Chris Olave, wide receiver, Ohio State to the Bucks. I had Tampa Bay getting Olave in my last mock. However, it was a few picks later. Of course, the Bucks lost in the 2nd round to the Rams, and with the retirement of Tom Brady, they very well could look at a quarterback. Desmond Ridder and Carson Strong are both still on the board. I think Tampa Bay would be the perfect landing spot for any rookie quarterback, but I think they're either going to want a veteran or they're going to want to see what they have in Kyle Trask. I don't think Kyle Trask is a starting caliber quarterback. I wouldn't roll with him, but maybe they believe in him. They did use a 2nd round pick on him, so they certainly have faith that he could be the guy. But regardless, I think they do need some help at wide receiver, which is hard to believe because they had such a good trio this season of Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, and Antonio Brown. But Antonio Brown did Antonio Brown type stuff. Chris Godwin coming off the ACL tear as a free agent. I don't know if they're really going to look to bring him back. Well, I imagine they're going to want to, but I don't know if Godwin's price tag will exceed what they'll be able to do. The Bucs have used quite a few day 3 picks on flyers at wide receiver, trying to get guys like Jalen Darden, Tyler Johnson, Cyril Grayson played pretty well down the stretch. Of course, they have Scotty Miller as well, but none of those guys are really reliable starters. So let's say Chris Godwin is gone. All they really have is Mike Evans. So now you add another actual starting caliber receiver in Chris Olave, who I think is one of the higher floor players in this draft. He's been so good for Ohio State for such a while. I think he can play on the inside and the outside, and I think he'd be a perfect complement to Mike Evans. Drake London, wide receiver, USC to the Packers. I think London is probably going to go higher than this, but there are some question marks with him. Will he be able to separate at the next level? Now, he does have the frame to be able to be a good jump ball receiver, and he's also very good after the catch. However, we have seen guys like N'Keal Harry, J.J. Arcega-Whiteside get drafted early, can't separate off the line of scrimmage, and now they're not even getting played by their respective teams. I don't think Drake London's going to become one of those guys just because of London's ability with the ball in his hands. I think with his size and his all-right route running ability, he should be able to get open and make plays with the ball. So I don't think he's going to turn into one of those guys. However, I'm not as high on London as others, but regardless, I think a lot of people are going to see this as a steal, and I think he fits the mold of a big-bodied receiver that Green Bay likes. So I think the team and player pairing makes a lot of sense. Arnold Ebiketie, edge rusher out of Penn State to the Dallas Cowboys, who just moved down 5 spots. They add a 3rd round pick, and now they add a nice piece to their defensive line. Dallas's defense dramatically improved this season, but I think they may look to add some more to their defensive line. DeMarcus Lawrence isn't getting any younger. Ebiketie had a great season at Penn State. A lot of draft analysts are super high on him. It seems like the media is higher on him than the general NFL draft community. And I think Ibikite very well could go higher, and it could be a surprise to many on how high he ends up going. Cameron Thomas, edge rusher, San Diego State to the Kansas City Chiefs. Melvin Ingram is a free agent at the end of the season. Frank Clark is kind of a wild card off the field, not to mention he's been a little bit disappointing on the field compared to what the Chiefs gave up to acquire him. So I think they're going to look for some more pass rush. The defense kind of let them down the stretch in the AFC Championship game, and I think Cam Thomas is another guy who could go higher than people expect. Our final trade of the day, the Bears are entering the first round, so the Bengals are going to move down 8 spots. They acquire pick 39, pick 185 in the 6th round, and a 3rd rounder in next year's draft. So that's a lot, only moving down 7 spots. The Bears go up 231, and they also add 137 in the 4th round. So I think it's pretty fair value there for both sides. Chicago's moving up for Washington cornerback Kyler Gordon, the 2nd Washington quarterback off the board here in the 1st round. The Bears are really, I think, like some of these other teams, starting their rebuild. New GM, new coach. They do have their quarterback in Justin Fields, who they believe is the guy, but I think they're going to really look to get some guys who can be culture setters, and I think they could use more at corner. Jalen Johnson's a great piece for the future, but other than that, there isn't a whole lot, so I think Kyler Gordon could make sense. And then pick 32, the final pick of the day, the Detroit Lions get Christian Harris, linebacker out of Alabama. Harris is a little bit raw, but he has shown the upside to be really, really good. And if he gets coached up, I think he could be something special. The Lions have a great defensive coordinator in Aaron Glenn, so I think that would be a nice fit, although Glenn is getting looks as the New Orleans Saints head coach. Assuming he doesn't get that job, he'll be back, and he'll have a great opportunity to develop Christian Harris, who's another guy who I think the NFL media and the league are going to be higher on than the general draft community. So I hope everybody enjoyed Mock Draft 2.0. We got some big trades, we got some surprises, but let me know what you guys thought. Make sure to hit the like button. Make sure to subscribe to the channel if you are new. Peace out. Mock Draft 3 coming out pretty soon.